Welcome back, night wanderers, to Nakora Nights. The Appalachian Mountains, beautiful, serene, and alive with secrets. The kind of secrets that whisper at night and follow you even after you leave. Tonight, we're going deeper than most dare. Into the darkest, most terrifying corners of Appalachia, where hikers vanish, cabins are haunted, and the shadows themselves seem to move. These are 10 true Appalachia horror stories. Tales pulled from park ranger logs, witness accounts, and local legends. Figures that appear on trails where no one else is walking. Voices calling your name from the deep woods. Campers waking to doors opening by themselves in the dead of night. Before we step into the darkness, I need to know, where are you watching from right now? And what time is it there? Because in Appalachia, after midnight, the forest doesn't just sleep, it hunts. If you're brave enough to face the unknown, hit like, subscribe, and comment below, "I survived Appalachia." Now, grab your flashlight, keep your voice down, and whatever you do, don't stray from the path. This is 10 Untold Most Disturbing True Appalachia Horror Stories. Let's begin. I never thought the place where I worked would ever push me back toward the mountains I spent my childhood trying to forget. But life has a strange way of folding itself around old fears. My name is Mason Hale, and I help maintain the old water systems that feed the smaller towns near the edge of the Appalachian Mountains, right where the roads thin out and the forest begins to swallow the sky. I grew up around these woods, learned early what paths were safe and which ones hummed with something you could never name. My dad taught me how to read the land, how to follow a broken branch or a bent blade of grass, and my mom taught me how to keep my head when the world felt too big and too dark. Back then, my best friend was a boy named Riley Ward, the kind of kid who made everything feel easy, the kind who cracked jokes even when the night pressed too close. Those memories felt like someone else's life, until the evening Riley showed me an old hand-drawn map he found in a forgotten drawer of his uncle's cabin. The paper was worn thin, edges soft as cloth, folded so many times it seemed tired. A ridge was marked in shaky pencil, circled again and again with a line that cut deep into the page. Stay out, not safe. I asked him if he really wanted to follow it. He gave me that grin he always had, the one that tried to make fear feel smaller, then said only one way to know. So we went, both of us older now but still stupid enough to chase after something we could not understand. The hike should have been easy, only a few miles, but the ground felt wrong beneath our boots. The roots were too sharp, the stones too slick, and the forest held a heaviness that pressed against us. We reached the ridge just before night settled. It was not tall, but it felt as if the world tightened the further we climbed. The air turned thick, almost too still, and even Riley stopped joking. He kept looking over his shoulder like he expected the trees to lean closer. We set up camp anyway because turning back felt worse somehow. The fire barely lit, the wood dry yet refusing to burn right, forcing us to huddle close to catch any warmth. The quiet pressed in hard, not peaceful, not calm, but empty, like something had hollowed it out. I kept glancing at the tree line, listening for anything, even a bird, but nothing broke that silence. Sometime after midnight, maybe 2:17 a.m., I heard steps moving slow across the ground. Heavy steps, too measured, as if someone practiced being careful. Riley sat up fast, his body tense, and reached for his hunting knife. I held my flashlight but did not turn it on because I did not want to see whatever stood just outside the glow of dying embers. The steps stopped, breath followed, wet and uneven, like something trying to copy how a person breathes but doing it wrong. It rattled too fast, then too slow, dragging air in like it was learning the motion for the first time. I felt Riley rise beside me, and his silhouette shifted as he tightened his grip on the blade. Before I could speak, the thing rushed us. All I saw was blurred motion, something shaped wrong, as if its body bent too many ways. Riley shouted and charged forward without hesitation, his knife cutting the darkness. The scream that followed hit me so sharp that my ears rang. It was high, too high, nothing human, nothing animal. The shape recoiled, snapped backward into the trees, and vanished so fast it almost seemed to dissolve. When Riley stumbled back, I caught him as he fell. His chest was torn open, his shirt ripped apart in lines too uneven to be claws. The wounds looked like they came from long, rough fingers, the kind a person should not have. I forced myself to work quickly, cleaning where I could and wrapping him tight, whispering to stay with me. I kept checking the tree line, expecting that uneven breathing to return. We left before sunrise, his arm pulled across my shoulders, both of us moving as fast as the terrain allowed. Every few minutes, I glanced back because I swear I heard someone calling, faint and low, repeating my full name even though I never said it aloud. Mason. Mason Hale. Drawn out slow like someone trying the shape of it for the first time. I kept telling myself it was the wind moving through dead branches, but the sound followed too steadily, almost patient. By the time we reached the road, Riley looked gray and dizzy. He spent weeks in the hospital. The doctors blamed a bear or a mountain lion, but nothing added up. The wounds were too uneven, too deep, shaped like something that had fingers, not paws. Riley did not correct them. He nodded along, his eyes empty, silence heavy in every movement. A few months later, he moved to Wyoming and took a job repairing old heating units for ranch homes spread far apart from each other. He said the wide land made it easier to breathe. I stayed. I still work the same job, still patch up pipes and check water lines, but I do not go near that ridge anymore. I stick to marked areas, and even then, the forest sometimes feels like it is listening. I try to pretend life went back to normal, but the mountains do not forget. They keep secrets the way old wounds keep poison. For a while I refused to step off the main paths, but eventually work forced me deeper again. One of the smaller stations reported strange readings, something about pressure in the underground valves. I had no choice but to follow the narrow trails into a part of the mountain I never knew well. Late afternoon shadows stretched long across the ground, and the trees creaked as if warning each other I had returned. The deeper I walked, the more uneasy I felt. The air carried that same heaviness, the same hollow quiet. I tried to ignore it until I reached an old coal shaft I did not remember being marked. It was half buried under tangled brush, the opening wide enough for a person to slip inside. My radio fizzed, cutting to silent static the closer I moved. I only planned to check for damage, but when I stepped near the mouth of the shaft, I heard someone whisper from deep inside, low and slow, repeating my full name again. Mason Hale, drawn like it was being traced by something unfamiliar with speech. I did not wait to hear it a second time. I backed away, careful not to break into a run, because part of me felt if I moved too fast it would follow. By the time I reached the station, my heartbeat had not slowed. I focused on the job, replaced what needed fixing, and tried to convince myself I imagined everything. I kept replaying that whisper, the shape in the dark, the weight of the breathing, but nothing made sense. I cleaned my hands, checked the gauge, and prepared to leave. That was when I saw the tent. Someone had set it up behind the structure, tucked between the trees. The fabric was torn in long slashes that ran from the top to the bottom, the kind of marks that looked like something tried to grab its way out, but the zipper was fastened tight from the inside. No footprints, no body, no belongings. Just a tent zipped shut with claw-like tears across the sides. I felt the forest watching, waiting, and I backed away, my eyes searching the ground for any sign of movement. I returned to the truck and locked the doors. The forest shifted around me like something moved behind the trees. I started driving, hands tight on the wheel, but the unease followed. The sun dipped low, and the shadows stretched across the road like fingers reaching. I kept checking the mirrors even though I knew better. Every story my dad told about things you were not supposed to watch or follow rose in my mind. When I reached the clearing where workers sometimes camp, I decided to rest until the shakes in my hands stopped. I left the engine running. The forest felt too close. I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them, the dark had settled across the area. Something scraped lightly against the back of the truck. Slow, soft. Testing the metal, I did not breathe. The scraping circled the truck and then stopped near my window. Before I could react, a whisper slid beside the glass, low and steady. "I know you are awake." The words pressed so close it felt like breath fogged the air. My stomach dropped, and I stared straight ahead, refusing to turn my head. The whisper paused, then pressed again. I know you hear me." A sound moved along the ground next to the truck, the same uneven breathing, the same dragging inhale and exhale, like a creature struggling to imitate a person. I clenched the steering wheel, forcing myself not to look into the mirrors. Minutes passed. The breathing faded. When the forest finally went still, I drove home as fast as the dirt road allowed. Even now, days later, I keep hearing that whisper in the cracks of silence. I do not sleep much. I keep the house lights on. Sometimes, when the wind drags across the windows, I hear my name again. Slow, 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 patient. I think whatever lived near that ridge never stopped watching. I think it remembers people who stepped too close, and I am starting to believe it followed me home. I opened my eyes that morning with a strange weight on my chest, like the world had been holding its breath and I had woken up inside the silence. I'm Rowan, and before everything went wrong, I used to work in a repair shop down in a small valley town called Marlow Ridge. Long hours, burnt nerves, and pressure that never let up finally cracked me open. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, my sleep was broken, and every shadow felt heavier than it should. My friends told me I needed a break. Maybe they were right. Maybe I should have stayed home anyway. A guy I knew, Cade, said his cousin had a quiet place deep in the Appalachian Mountains, tucked far from everything noisy. A little cabin outside a lonely town called Winter's Bluff, barely used anymore but stocked and safe. He told me it was perfect. Still woods, cool air, nothing but peace. I didn't question him. I just wanted to breathe again. The story really begins when I drove up there, hours into the mountains, following the narrow road that twisted like something alive. By the time I reached the cabin at 3:42 p.m., fog had already settled low across the trees, curling around the porch like pale fingers. The place looked old, weather-beaten, built with dark logs and a crooked chimney leaning like tired bones. The trees crowded tight around it, no open yard, no space to breathe except the thin clearing right in front. There was no signal on my phone, but I had expected that. Disconnection was supposed to help me, or so I had told myself. A man was standing near the steps, thin as a broken branch. He introduced himself as Silas, the caretaker. Maybe late 40s, maybe earlier, but worn down by something I couldn't name. His long, ash-colored hair hung around a face that looked stretched a little too tight, like his skin didn't quite fit right. His smile felt wrong from the moment I saw it, wide but empty, a shape that did not belong on a human face. "You'll have the place to yourself," he said in a smooth, hushed tone. "I stay nearby. If you need anything, just call out." Before I could ask anything more, he walked straight into the woods, not toward any path or road, just stepped between the trees and vanished as if he'd been swallowed. I told myself mountain folks were different. Maybe that was normal for him. Maybe I was reading too much into everything because my nerves were wrecked. That first night, I slept better than I had in months. I lit a small fire, warmed the room, read a bit, and went to bed early with the comforting weight of the quiet pressing softly around me. The second night is when things changed. Just after 10:16 p.m., I heard 3 soft knocks. Not on the door, on the window beside the kitchen sink. I froze, every hair rising along my arms. The knocks were small, careful, like someone tapping with the tip of a finger. I waited, holding my breath, but nothing followed. I walked over with my flashlight, shining it into the dark forest. Nothing but trees, shadows, and stillness. I convinced myself it was a branch or maybe a squirrel. Forests make sounds. That's normal. But on the third night, the knocking came again, 3 sharp taps, this time from the window near the living room. Same rhythm, same patience. Like someone repeating a message I didn't understand, I didn't go to the window right away. I stood in the center of the cabin with my flashlight shaking in my hand, my breath too loud in my ears. When I finally checked, nothing was there, the woods standing quiet and cold. That's when I saw him. Silas stood halfway into the tree line, still as a stone, watching the cabin. He didn't move, didn't sway, didn't breathe. He just stared. I stepped outside and called his name into the night, the sound of my voice trembling in the air. He didn't respond. Instead, he drifted backward into the darkness, not turning, just sliding away like time reversing. After a moment, he was gone. I didn't sleep after that. By dawn, my chest was tight with panic. I packed my bag before breakfast, determined to hike out and find a road, any road. But when I opened the front door, Silas was standing there, inches away, so close that his face nearly brushed mine. "You said you were leaving tomorrow," he murmured. His voice was wrong, soft in the wrong places, like someone copying a human voice from memory but missing the rhythm. A strange smoothness, like words molded instead of spoken. "I changed my mind," I said, trying to steady my tone while my heart pounded so hard it hurt. He smiled, too wide, stretching farther than any smile should, the skin at the edges pulling tight. There were no teeth, just a dark, wet space where a mouth should have been, like an opening into something hollow. "There's nothing out there for you," he whispered. Then he turned with that same gliding motion and slipped around the side of the cabin. I slammed the door and locked it. I tried calling Kate. Straight to voicemail, again and again. No signal, no help. I paced the room, my breath shaking, telling myself he was just some strange man, nothing supernatural. But then, from the back room, I heard my own voice calling my name. Not similar. Not close. My exact voice. I didn't even turn toward it. I grabbed my pack, shoved open the front door, and ran into the woods. No path, no direction, just downhill, desperate to get away. The forest around me felt wrong, too quiet, as if everything alive had stepped aside and left me alone with something watching. Branches scraped my arms, rocks slid under my shoes, and my lungs burned as I pushed farther down the slope. When my legs finally gave out, I fell face first into gravel. I looked up and saw a ranger station just ahead. I stumbled inside and told the ranger I had gotten lost while hiking. I didn't tell him anything about the cabin, or Silas, or the knocking. His expression already said he didn't believe hikers came from that direction anyway. When I got home, I called Kate again, furious, shaking. I asked him what kind of place he had sent me to. "What cabin?" he said. "What are you talking about?" "The one near Winter's Bluff," I said. "You said your cousins." "Rowan, I don't have any cousins with a cabin." "Winter's Bluff isn't even near here. I've never sent you anywhere like that." I don't know what I stayed in. I don't know what Silas was. But he wasn't human, and I don't think that cabin has belonged to anyone for a very long time. I never imagined a single hike could change the way I saw the world forever. That day, I walked into the mountains, and something unseen walked back with me. My name is Nathan Harlow, and this happened 6 years ago. I was fresh out of college, working as a wildlife researcher, someone who spent more time in forests than in human company. Nature felt honest, safer than the chaos of towns, and the forests near Timber Hollow were my escape. Timber Hollow was a tiny, forgotten town tucked in the Blue Ridge Mountains. You could drive past it without even noticing, but the forests surrounding it were ancient and silent, as if the trees had been keeping secrets for centuries. Some locals whispered about certain paths and trails, old stories that made hikers uneasy, but I never paid attention. That summer, I found a trail no one seemed to know about. On a backcountry hiking forum, someone had posted coordinates for Trail 59, a path that didn't appear on any official map. The post said, "Stop at the second cairn, don't go further, nothing else." No explanation, no warning, no follow-up. The user hadn't posted in years. I laughed at the mystery, thinking I was invincible. I packed lightly, grabbed my compass, and headed out just after sunrise, the morning air crisp and quiet. The beginning of the trail was exactly what I loved. Soft dirt under my boots, leaves rustling in the breeze, the occasional bird call, the smell of damp moss. I passed the first cairn, a neat stack of gray stones by a bend, paused for a photo, and moved on. The second cairn barely looked like anything, moss-covered and low to the ground. I walked about 20 feet past it before a strange sensation stopped me. The forest went completely silent. No wind, no birds, not even insects. My ears felt clogged, like I had dived underwater. I checked my phone. The GPS spun in circles and froze. The trail line disappeared. My compass needle jittered violently, shaking like it was being torn apart by invisible hands. I turned back. The trail was gone. Trees stretched endlessly, all smooth, gray, and identical. My footprints were erased. A creeping pressure filled my chest. I took a step forward, then another, marking trees with broken twigs, counting my steps. That's when I heard it. A soft whistle, 2 notes, playful and almost inviting. I didn't think. I just followed it. 30 feet ahead, I saw a woman standing barefoot, her hair black and dripping, as if she had just risen from a lake. She didn't move at first, then she whistled again, the same 2 notes. I followed, as if some invisible string pulled me forward. Time didn't pass. The sun stayed in the same place. The ground grew soft, sucking at my boots with every step. We passed under a low stone arch covered in strange symbols. The air turned freezing. I could see my breath. My fingers went numb, my lips cracked. Ahead, a small cabin appeared, wrong in every way. Its boards twisted unnaturally, windows opaque with a waxy film, the door carved with symbols I couldn't read. I didn't knock. I opened the door. Darkness swallowed me. My flashlight flickered and died. My phone refused to turn on. The door slammed behind me. Inside, a calm female voice spoke in my mind, showing memories and visions that weren't mine. I saw the forest breathing, ground pulsing with light, gods buried beneath stone, and countless versions of myself walking into this place, again and again. When I woke, I was lying in mud. My throat burned, lips torn, boots and backpack gone. I had lost nearly 30 pounds. Days later, I found my car. No one had searched for me. But I wasn't alone. Over the next few weeks, I felt watched. Shadows moved where there shouldn't be shadows. At night, I heard laughter from the hill behind my house, children laughing, though the town hadn't had children live there in over 50 years. Sometimes I found a cup of coffee sitting on the porch rail, steaming, warm, far from any town or cafe. I never drank it, but the smell haunted me. One evening, I was hiking near the edge of Timber Hollow. I heard a voice calling my brother's name. My stomach dropped. My brother had died in a car accident on these mountains years ago. I called back, but only my own voice echoed. Panic clawed at me, and I ran. Weeks after, I returned to Trail 59, needing answers. The forest had grown even stranger. The first cairn looked older, worn, and the second cairn now had fresh moss as if it had been moved. I walked past it carefully. The whistle came again, the same 2 notes. I followed, my instincts screaming to turn back. The woman appeared again, leading me deeper. The trees now seemed to lean toward me, their smooth trunks pulsing, almost alive. We came to a clearing. A group of children stood laughing atop a small hill, their voices echoing through the mist. I froze. The hill had been abandoned for decades, yet the laughter was bright and clear. They didn't see me. One by one, they vanished into thin air, leaving only silence behind. I stumbled back, heart pounding. I found the cabin again. This time, I circled it. Smoke rose from a broken chimney. The door creaked open by itself. I didn't enter. From inside, whispers filled my mind. Images of myself, older than I should be, walking these trails, following the same 2-note whistle. Each vision felt like a warning, but also a promise of return. That night at Timber Hollow, I couldn't sleep. Shadows moved across the walls. I kept seeing footprints in the mud outside my cabin, footprints I didn't make. My compass spun wildly, even indoors. The air was thick, heavy, alive. My thoughts weren't my own. I felt the forest reach out through the windows. I decided to leave again, to escape, but the roads twisted and turned like the mountains themselves had changed. At a gas station, I found a cup of coffee, warm, fresh, steaming, sitting on a rock as if waiting for me. No one around. My instinct screamed to grab it and run. I didn't. The smell lingered hours after, taunting me. Days passed. I tried returning to a normal life, but the forest called. The whistle came in dreams, 2 notes, soft, inviting. I found myself walking Trail 59 in my sleep, sometimes waking to find my boots covered in mud. I saw faces in the shadows, sometimes my brother, sometimes strangers, children laughing, figures watching. One day, I followed the whistle to a part of the mountains I didn't recognize. The ground pulsed, alive, sucking at my boots. The woman appeared again, barefoot, hair wet, silent. She led me to a clearing. The cabin, twisted, appeared behind her, walls breathing. I didn't enter. I watched as shadows moved inside, as whispers reached into my mind, showing the countless versions of me that had come and gone. I turned back, finally realizing I would never fully leave. Trail 59, Timber Hollow, the laughing children, the coffee, the whispers, they were part of me now. Wherever I went, they followed. Time and distance no longer mattered. The forest didn't want me gone. It wanted me as it wanted everyone who dared follow the two-note whistle. Even now, when I close my eyes, I hear it, the soft whistle, beckoning me back to the mountains, to the cabin, to Trail 59. Sometimes I swear I see footprints appear behind me in mud that shouldn't exist. Sometimes a warm cup of coffee sits where I last stood. The forest waits. Always. And I know, deep down, I will follow it again. I never thought a weekend hike could become a nightmare. My name is Ryan, and that's not important, except it's the only part of myself I had left when this started. Life in Asheville had worn me down. Work felt like dragging stones uphill, friendships drained more than they filled, and my girlfriend had vanished without explanation. I needed to vanish too, even if only for a few days. I bought a bus ticket to Cedar Hollow, a tiny town tucked deep in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I told no one where I was going, switched off my phone, and stepped into the forest like I was leaving the world behind. The first 2 days were everything I wanted. The trail twisted through thick pines, mossy rocks, and narrow streams. Water ran beside me, singing like it knew my secrets. I set up camp in hidden clearings, cooked simple meals over a small stove, and wrote in a journal I hadn't touched in months. Nights were quiet. Crickets and owls spoke to the dark, and I slept through it, feeling human again, free from nightmares. Then came day 3. I reached a small creek surrounded by dense firs, soft moss, and level ground, perfect for camping. I was finishing a simple dinner of instant rice mixed with canned chicken when I heard it, slow, deliberate footsteps. My chest tightened. Hikers passed sometimes, but this sounded different, intentional, measuring the space like it belonged here long before me. He appeared from the trees without warning, tall, thin, with hair streaked gray and red, like sunset caught in strands. His clothes were old, ragged, patched together from jackets and jeans, boots nearly falling apart. A long knife hung from his belt in a sheath of duct tape and leather. He smiled, and I felt my stomach drop. "Camping alone?" he asked, eyes sweeping the clearing as though reading my thoughts. I lied. "My friend is just up the hill," I said, hoping it would seem believable. He nodded slowly, then asked if he could set up nearby. Something in his tone made refusing impossible. He dropped a rolled blanket, no backpack, no supplies, just the knife and a canteen. I watched him unfold the tarp and felt my stomach twist. Who hikes without food or water? That night, I didn't sleep. I zipped my tent tight, gripping my flashlight like a shield. Outside, he sat silently by the fire, muttering words I didn't understand. His voice was calm, low, steady. His breathing was controlled, almost mechanical, not the soft rhythm of sleep. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, made me jolt upright. By dawn, I was packed and moving before him. "You sure you don't want company?" he asked, calm. Casual. "I hike better alone," I lied again. He smiled, thinner now, almost sharp, and said, "A lot of people disappear out here." I didn't answer, just ran down the trail, muscles trembling, heart hammering. That night, I didn't light a fire. I ate a cold protein bar and collapsed into my tent, knife close, heart racing. Morning brought a smell that made me gag. Outside, a squirrel lay on its back, belly slit open, organs gone, eyes frozen wide. No footprints anywhere. I buried it under rocks and ran. By mid-afternoon, my legs shook. My pack felt heavier with every step. My mind raced with questions. Was he following, or had he already vanished? I knew better than to stop. I didn't look back. I passed a fallen tree that could have hidden a dozen people, a steep cliff that could have ended everything, and streams so deep I had to hop rocks to cross. Each step was survival, not hiking. As night fell again, I found a lean-to, 3 walls, a roof, graffiti carved into every plank, names scratched over years, but something about the place felt different now, ominous. My legs begged me to keep moving, but I had no strength. I set my bag down, ate what remained of my rations, kept my knife within reach, and tried to rest. The forest went dead silent. No crickets, no wind, nothing. Then footsteps, soft, precise, crunching over dead leaves. Something dragged along the ground. I froze, holding my breath. "Thought I might catch up with you," a voice said, calm, casual, chilling. I grabbed my flashlight and knife. He stepped into the clearing, calm as a man visiting a neighbor. Same clothes, same knife, smile forced. "You sleeping yet?" he asked. I didn't answer. He swayed near the lean-to, knife swinging lightly. "You left too quick." "Didn't even say goodbye," he muttered, then walked back into the darkness. I didn't sleep. Not a wink. Morning brought light, but no comfort. Behind me, carved in the wood, "Still watching you." My legs moved mechanically. Each step was agony. I passed twisted roots, sharp rocks, streams that swallowed my boots. The mountains whispered his presence, patient, unseen, relentless. For 2 days I walked without stopping. Every shadow seemed alive. Trees bent strangely, streams reflected more than sky. I found animal corpses, arranged like warnings. Squirrels, birds, even a small fox. No footprints around them. My journal filled with frantic sketches of his face, knife, stance, each one worse than the last. One night, I saw him again. A figure moved uphill carrying a lantern with no flame. It stopped, just a silhouette watching. I froze, heart racing, and then it vanished into the trees. No footprints, no sound. Only the wind, whispering through the pines. The next night, a small cabin appeared on the ridge. Someone knocked every minute at the same time. I checked. No footprints. The door never moved. I stayed hidden, watching, clutching my knife. Shapes walked past under the stars, lingering beside me, yet the soft dirt remained unmarked. By the 4th day, exhaustion twisted my mind. I stumbled through thick fog along the ridge, streams breaking my steps, roots tripping me. My skin burned with cold. My stomach ached with hunger. I started seeing him everywhere, between trees, reflected in water, crouched on fallen logs. Always calm, always patient. I reached the highway by mid-afternoon. A truck stopped, the driver staring. I gave him a weak nod. I told him I had a rough night. No one could understand what I'd seen. Not my parents, not cops, not the trail office. I never went back. Even now, years later, I can't hike alone. The mountains remember him. The soft dirt, the hidden creeks, the silent cabins, all whisper his patience. Every night, I imagine the lantern without flame, the calm voice, the knife swinging lightly. Waiting, watching. I replay the memories. The squirrel posed like a warning. Footsteps that moved without direction. Doors knocked with no footprints. Cabin windows glowing under moonlight. Figures appearing then vanishing. Each memory is sharp, like the tip of his knife. Sometimes I ask myself if he is real or just the mountains twisting my mind. But the smell, the corpses, the soft steps in the night cannot be imagination. He exists. He has patience beyond reason. He waits. He watches. Even in the city, I feel it. Shadows stretching across walls, reflections in windows, silhouettes moving behind curtains. The mountains are far, but his presence is everywhere now, stitched into my skin, my memory, my mind. I live in constant alert, glancing over shoulders, flinching at every crack of wood or rustle of leaves. Sleep comes only in short, shallow bursts. Every night I dream of the creek, the lean-to, the silent footsteps. The lantern with no flame appears, swinging slowly, moving closer. The forest does not forgive, and it does not forget. He moves with it, through it, patient, quiet, unstoppable. I survived, but every step in life reminds me of those woods. I tell myself I will never return, but I know it's not just about the trail. It's about him. Always waiting, always watching, always near enough to remember. Even writing this now, the memory makes my hands shake. The mountains are alive, and so is he. The night carries his voice. The soft crunch of leaves is a warning. I can never undo what I saw, what I felt, what followed me out of the Blue Ridge. And one day, I know he will come again. I never felt truly alive until I was alone in the woods. My name is Garrett, and I work in remote trail maintenance, fixing paths that most people have forgotten exist. Growing up, my house was chaos. TV always blaring, doors slamming, yelling across the hall. Out here, the forest is quiet, and the quiet feels alive. It's almost like the trees are breathing with me. I spend hours walking paths no one has touched in decades, clearing rocks, repairing steps, brushing leaves away. Most people would call this work lonely, but for me, it's a kind of peace I've never known elsewhere. Last September, I got hired for a contract near the Virginia-West Virginia border. The task was simple on paper: inspect an abandoned ranger cabin hidden deep in the hills and prepare it for future restoration. No roads led there, no signs on the map. The company had to fly me in by helicopter. As the chopper lifted off and vanished into the canopy, my stomach dropped, like I'd stepped off a cliff with nothing below. The cabin sat in a hollow, surrounded by dense trees, a skeleton of its former self. The roof sagged like it was exhaling its last breath. Moss hung from the walls like old curtains. A single window was held together by duct tape, patched wood, and hope. Still, I told myself I could work with this. The first 2 days were routine. I cleared fallen branches, patched holes and sorted supplies dropped from a small cargo sling. Dusty cabinets held old ranger logs, most from the 1970s. Weather notes, deer sightings, bear tracks, mundane records. Nothing that hinted at the horror waiting in the shadows. At night, the cabin felt impossibly large, empty, and hollow. My flashlight didn't reach the corners. The wind whispered through cracks in the walls, sounding like someone muttering just out of earshot. On the third night, I heard the tapping. Tick, tick, tick. Slow, deliberate, always 3. It came from the edge of the clearing, just beyond the light of my headlamp. I froze. The sound wasn't random. Every time I pointed my light at it, the noise stopped, only to return as soon as I looked away. My fingers curled around the small hatchet I kept under my pillow. I didn't sleep that night. I listened. Tick, tick, tick. The next morning, 3 smooth stones were stacked neatly on the threshold, pale river rocks, balanced perfectly. I stared at them for a long moment before kicking them over. My mind tried to rationalize it. An animal, the wind, a trick of light. I hiked up the ridge that morning to get a signal on the sat phone. Holding it required standing on one leg, arms stretched out, balancing over a cliff edge like some fool. It took 10 minutes to send a single message. On the way back, I noticed a faint path I hadn't seen before. Leaves had been brushed aside, dirt pressed down, like someone had walked it recently. No blazes marked it, no signs of old use. Something drew me in. I followed it, my heart beating, boots crunching on fallen leaves. Half a mile in, I reached a clearing dominated by a single blackened tree, charred from top to bottom, standing as if nothing could bring it down. Around it were dozens of stone stacks arranged in spirals and arcs. Feathers stuck out from some, others bore streaks of dark red, blood, clay, or paint, I couldn't tell. Then the tapping returned, closer now. Tick, 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 tick. The blackened trees seemed to shimmer, the bark rippling like heat off pavement. Something moved behind it. I backed away slowly, then ran the rest of the way to the cabin, slamming the door and dragging a shelving unit in front. My hands shook. My mouth was dry. I stayed awake all night listening to whispers low and rhythmic, "Leave them, leave them, leave them." The next morning, the stones were back, stacked on the door handle. On top lay a rabbit skull, hollowed clean from the back. No blood, no predator could have done this. My mind couldn't accept it. I packed my essentials, bolted down the hill, following the creek bed, slipping, twisting my ankle, but never stopping. Hours later, I reached the ranger station, filthy, mud-caked, dehydrated. Officials dismissed my story as isolation stress, refusing to see the stones, the skull, or the shadow I had glimpsed. I never went back alone, not ever. The woods still called, but I knew better. A week later, my curiosity got the better of me. I returned, this time with 2 companions. We planned to map the area properly. We arrived at dusk. Shadows stretched long, shapes in the trees that weren't trees. One of the trail runners we hired swore she saw someone crouching behind every 3rd tree, the same height, same posture, disappearing when she tried to focus. We set up camp near the blackened tree. That night, one of my companions filmed wildlife with a night lens. He froze, whispering, pointing at the screen. A figure sprinted between trees at impossible speed, vanishing before it could touch the ground. No human could move like that. Sleep was impossible. The whispers returned, now mingled with voices from the cabin attic, which was nailed shut decades ago. Conversations floated down the walls, unintelligible but urgent. "Leave them, leave them." Something about the sound pressed in on us, heavy, like the forest itself was breathing directly on our necks. We tried following the creek bed to escape, but the terrain shifted unnaturally. Switchbacks vanished, trails looped back on themselves, the path seemed alive, guiding us back to the cabin. The stones had multiplied, forming circles, crescents, intricate patterns. Feathers, small bones, and more hollowed skulls lay within them. Over the next several nights, the terror escalated. One morning, I woke to find marks on my body, scratches that hadn't been there the night before, deep, precise. My companions experienced the same. The figure from the tree line began appearing closer, then in our peripheral vision, always out of reach, swaying like a hollow stump. By the 4th night, panic had set in. We tried to climb the ridge to get a signal, but the sat phone failed, again requiring a precise stance to send even a single message. Each attempt drew the figure closer, as if it knew our plans. Tick, tick, tick. Inside our chests, behind our sternums. We decided to leave at dawn, following the creek bed, twisting, slipping, running blindly. The figure moved with us, always staying just out of sight, yet the sound of its ticking was relentless. We reached the ranger station, exhausted, carrying injuries, shaking. Officials again dismissed us, citing stress, exhaustion, and delirium. No evidence could explain what we had experienced. I still work in the woods, but never alone. Every trail I repair, every cabin I inspect, I carry the memory of that blackened tree, the stones, the skulls, and the tapping in my chest. Trail runners report someone crouching behind every 3rd tree. Wildlife photographers capture impossible shadows, and families staying in cabins hear voices in attics, even when doors are nailed shut. Sometimes, even now, I wake to that tick, tick, tick inside me. It's never really gone. Something in the Appalachian Mountains is patient, watching, always waiting. It's aware of me, of anyone who dares step too deep. I've learned the woods are alive in ways most cannot comprehend, and I know, somewhere in the shadows, it waits for the next person foolish enough to wander alone. Each visit to the forest reminds me, the trees are not just trees, the wind is not just wind, and the quiet is never really empty. It carries something with it. Something patient, something hungry. And sometimes, in the stillest hours of night, I hear the ticking again, inside my chest, and I know it remembers me. I will never go back alone. I was 19 when this happened, still trying to recover from the mess I had made of my life the year before. My name is Cal Maddox, and back then I was studying wildlife conservation mostly because I grew up chasing frogs and hiking old trails behind my grandmother's house in rural Tennessee. But after she died, something in me shut down. I failed 2 classes, pulled away from friends, and pretended I was fine. I wasn't. I was drifting through each day like my mind was stuck in a fog I couldn't shake. My advisor told me I needed rest, real rest, not the kind where you sleep through the day and stay up all night staring at a ceiling fan. My roommate Nate said I just needed fresh air and a reset. I guess he was right. So when midterms hit and I found myself barely awake, running on vending machine snacks and cheap coffee, Nate looked at me and said, "We should disappear into the hills for a night." Not forever, not a long trip, just enough time to breathe and feel something real again. Nate had a cousin named Claire whose friend owned a cabin deep in the Appalachian Mountains near a tiny place called Red Ash Gap. Thick woods, no cell towers, nothing but the echo of your own steps. Claire said the cabin belonged to some old family she barely knew, but they rented it out sometimes because it kept vandals away. She promised it was simple but warm, quiet but safe. Safe was exactly what I thought I needed. The group ended up being 6 of us crammed into Nate's old SUV that smelled like wet leaves and gym socks. Nate drove. Claire sat up front sorting through trail mix packets, and in the back were me, Jonah, little Ivy, who was shorter than all of us but had the loudest laugh, and a guy named Porter who we still called Wren back then because he collected bird feathers. None of us packed lightly. We had way too many bags for one night, stuffed with blankets, cheap snacks, and enough socks to survive winter twice. We drove out Friday afternoon, music blasting, windows cracked just enough to pull in the smell of pine and river water. The road twisted higher and higher until the trees pressed in close like they were listening. Nate's GPS died before we reached our turn, leaving us with a blurry screenshot Claire had taken earlier. The last stretch of road was a narrow dirt path leaning over a long drop into a valley swallowed by shadows. Every bump rattled something loose in the car. We held our breath when we passed a fallen tree that barely cleared the roof. When we reached the cabin, the sun was sinking fast. The place looked older than the mountain itself, an A-frame eaten by moss and leaning slightly like it was tired of standing. Only one open space existed for the SUV to turn around, and after that it was nothing but endless woods. Trees towered in tight rows, branches scraped together like they were whispering. But we were excited, grateful even, so we unloaded everything before the light was gone completely. Claire went straight for the cooler. Nate hunted for firewood behind the leaning shed. Jonah got the old speaker working, though it cut out every few minutes like something was interfering with it. Ivy claimed the rocking chair by the tiny porch, and Wren, well, he wandered around picking up pine cones like he might adopt them. It felt almost normal. We cooked whatever we could hold over the flames, laughed at dumb stories from freshman year, and teased each other about who would fall asleep first. Then the woods shifted. I didn't notice it right away. First, it was the quiet, a thick, heavy pause that swallowed the chatter like someone pressed mute. The fire crackled. The wind hissed in the trees. But underneath it all was something else, something faint but wrong, a little prickling in my chest, like someone was staring straight at me from a dark room. It wasn't fear, not exactly, more like a feeling of being studied. I tried brushing it off, took a slow sip from my cup, and lifted my eyes toward the tree line. That was when I saw something standing in the dark. It wasn't close, not at first. It was just beyond where the firelight faded into black, a tall shape between the trunks, upright, motionless, watching. I blinked hard. Maybe it was a stump, I thought. A trick of shadows. But when I leaned a little to the side, it leaned too, or rather, its outline shifted as if it were waiting for me to notice. My stomach tightened. I elbowed Nate, whispered that something was out there. He squinted, shrugged, said maybe it was a deer, but every deer I had ever seen moved like they belonged to the forest. This shape felt wrong, like it was out of place, like it was wearing the woods as a mask. Ivy caught us staring and got up to look. She called out toward the trees, asking if Claire was messing with us. Claire had gone inside a few minutes earlier to get blankets. She answered from the porch with a confused voice, and we snapped our eyes back to the tree line. The figure was gone. Nate tensed. He wasn't the type to spook easily. Jonah's grip tightened on his cup. Wren's wide eyes darted between the trees like he was trying to track something invisible. I didn't like any of it. Not the silence that followed. Not the cold breeze that slid over my neck. Not the feeling that whatever had stood there wasn't done with us. We put the fire out early, locked the cabin door, checked the windows even though most didn't close right. The place groaned and popped like old bones being shifted into new positions. On the wall was an old hunting rifle coated in dust so thick it looked like fur. Claire said it belonged to the cabin's owner, but she didn't know if it worked. Nate took it anyway and found a few shells in a drawer filled with moldy cards and expired bug spray. Ren and I went to check the small back window that faced the shed. His breath caught halfway through looking outside, and he choked out that someone was standing near the shed. We rushed to the kitchen window, all of us staring into the dim yard. A figure stood beside the shed, leaning slightly as if its balance was off. It wore a hoodie and jeans that looked too clean for this place, same height as Ivy, but definitely not Ivy. Its head hung sideways like its neck was too weak to hold it straight. Its arms dangled at odd angles, hands twitching like broken branches trying to remember how to move. One hand scraped slowly across the shed wall, fingers bending backward as if they were made of wet clay. Then it screamed. Not from outside, not from the yard. The sound came from under us, deep in the floor, vibrating through the boards. It was thick and wet and angry, like something dying and something being born at the same time. The cabin rattled, nails creaked. Something beneath us pushed so hard I thought the floor would snap. Claire covered her ears. Ivy stumbled backward. Jonah froze like his mind shut down. Nate nearly dropped the rifle. The figure outside jerked forward, each step a crooked pull like invisible strings were yanking its limbs. I fumbled for the shells, hands shaking so violently one slipped between the cracks in the floor. I shoved the others into the chamber, heart hammering. Then it spoke with my voice. It called my name like a command, like it owned me. Then came laughter, high-pitched and broken, vibrating inside my skull. It repeated things I had said earlier that day, even stupid jokes I'd barely remembered. Every word matched my tone exactly, like it had been hiding in the woods listening for hours, learning me. Nate snapped. He flung the door open and fired into the dark. The echo slammed through the trees and rolled down the ridge like thunder trying to tear the sky apart. Silence followed. No scream. No body. Just a strange fog coiling over the porch like a living thing. No one spoke. No one blinked. We barricaded ourselves inside, backs pressed to the wall, eyes drawn to every corner as if something waited in the cracks. Claire whispered a prayer under her breath. Ivy clutched the fireplace poker so hard her knuckles split and bled. Jonah muttered over and over that none of this could be real. Sometime after 2:17 a.m., the smell arrived. Rotten meat, thick and sweet, filling the cabin until we gagged. It clung to our clothes, to our skin, to every breath we took. Jonah ran to the sink and threw up. The rest of us could barely swallow our fear. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the smell vanished like something had sucked it back into the floor. That was it for us. We grabbed whatever we could find in 3 chaotic minutes. Claire held the keys, hands trembling. Nate drove with the rifle across his lap. None of us looked back at the cabin, not once. Halfway down the mountain, wrapped in fog so dense we could barely see the road, my phone buzzed. No signal. Just one new voicemail from my own number. Against every instinct in my body, I pressed play. A slow, raspy breathing filled my ear, wet and crackling. Then my voice spoke again, soft but sharp, begging to be let in. That same horrible scream followed, the one that had torn through the cabin floor. And behind it, faint but real, I heard the creak of a door swinging open. We never went back. We never talked about it for months. Claire stopped speaking to the person who owned the cabin. Jonah transferred schools by winter. Ivy and Nate still text me sometimes, but we never mention Red Ash Gap, not anymore. But I wish I could say that was the end. It wasn't. Things followed us home. For weeks afterward, I heard footsteps behind me on late walks across campus. Not normal steps. These matched mine, copying my rhythm perfectly, stopping whenever I stopped, starting whenever I started. I told myself it was stress, but whenever I looked behind me, the sidewalk was empty. One afternoon while hiking near my dorm, I found a tree with fresh carvings of my initials. Not the old childhood style, not the way I sign things now. It was the way I carved them at age 7 because I had crooked handwriting. The cuts were too deep, too sharp, too recent. I had never touched that tree in my life. Another week passed. I joined a friend at a small lake behind the biology building where students sometimes fish at night. I saw someone standing in the water up to their knees, staring straight up at the sky without moving. Not blinking, not shifting, just staring. I watched for almost an hour while they remained frozen like a statue. When I returned the next night to convince myself I had imagined it, the same figure stood in the same place, water swirling around their legs like they didn't feel the cold at all. Some nights I catch my own voice whispering through my vents. Not words, just breathing. Sometimes I dream of footsteps matching mine through the forest, and when I wake up, mud is smeared across my bedroom floor. The worst part is that I think the mountains remember us. I think they remember me. I think whatever stood behind that shed learned me piece by piece, and now it walks where I walk, waits where I wait, breathes where I breathe. And I don't know how to stop something that wears my voice like a mask. I don't think it's done. I don't think it ever left those woods. I think it followed the last person who looked directly at it. I think that person was me. I never planned to go back up there, not after what happened on the old ridge above Buckner Hollow. Sometimes I still hear the wind moving through those trees like it's saying something I shouldn't understand, like it's trying to pull me back. My name is Noah Graves. I work as a field technician for a small survey company out of Asheville. Most days, it's boring work mapping trails, checking water lines, marking property lines. But that summer, I got assigned to check on an old boundary marker near the edge of the Smoky Mountains, deep in the Appalachian backcountry. My Uncle Owen owned a cabin up near the Tennessee border, a place he hadn't used much since my aunt passed. I thought I could stay there while I did the survey work. It was quiet, isolated, a good place to think. The cabin sat 6 miles down a dirt road, so narrow you could barely fit a truck through without scraping the trees. There was no cell signal, no Wi-Fi, no hum of traffic, just the crackle of the woods and the hiss of the wind through the pine needles. I remember thinking how the air smelled thick, damp, like old moss and wet stone. I used to come here when I was a kid. My cousins, Reed and Marla, would tag along. Back then, we treated the woods like they were our playground, daring each other to wander farther, deeper. We used to chase each other along the creek, make forts out of fallen limbs, and tell stories about the hunters who supposedly vanished up there. That first night, I couldn't sleep. The silence pressed on me, heavy and close. I sat by the small window, watching the moon slide over the trees. I could hear something faint, maybe a breeze, maybe not. Every time I thought I'd identified it, it stopped. The next morning, I hiked out to the site I was supposed to map. It wasn't far from a trail people around there called the Old Ridge Path, but the locals said it wasn't safe anymore. Mudslides had torn it up years ago. Still, I figured I could use part of it to cut through faster. I had my gear, my map, a half-dead radio, and just enough confidence to ignore the way the forest seemed to shift around me. The deeper I went, the darker it got. The trees grew close, thick enough that daylight broke into thin white lines on the ground. Somewhere behind me, water trickled through an unseen creek, slow and steady. After an hour, I found something strange. Piles of rocks, maybe a dozen of them, arranged in little stacks along the trail. Not random. Each one was shaped like a person, arms, legs, even heads made from small stones. They all faced the same direction, my direction. I tried to laugh it off, but it didn't sound right in the stillness. I took a photo for the report, told myself it was just some hiker being weird. But when I turned back to the path, I swear one of the piles had shifted, just a little. Its arm pointed higher now, toward the ridge. I didn't stay long. The air felt colder up there, and the shadows had teeth. I hiked back toward the cabin before sunset, trying not to notice how the woods had gone too quiet again. That night, the wind picked up. The trees moaned like old bones bending. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, circling the cabin. I turned off the lantern and listened. My breath sounded too loud in my chest. The steps came closer, stopped by the door. Then I heard it. A whisper, so soft it almost blended with the wind. "Count your breaths." I froze. My heart beat so hard I thought it would shake the walls. "Count your breaths." I waited, clutching the flashlight, staring at the door. After a minute, the sound moved away. When I finally got the courage to look out, the yard was empty. Just my own footprints from earlier. In the morning, I found marks in the dirt near the steps. Bare footprints, long ones. I tried to tell myself it was an animal, maybe a bear's tracks distorted by rain, but there hadn't been any rain. I thought about packing up, leaving, but then I remembered the job, the survey I still hadn't finished. Maybe that's what kept me there. Maybe something else wanted me to stay. On the third day, Reed and Marla showed up. They'd driven in to surprise me, said they were nearby camping and figured they'd stop in. I didn't tell them what happened that night. I didn't want to sound insane. We spent most of the morning catching up. Then Reed found the old trail sign out behind the cabin. Old ridge path, faded and split. He grinned, that same reckless grin I remembered from our childhood. "Let's go see if the old hunter camp is still out there," he said. I didn't want to. Every part of me screamed not to. But I followed. The path was barely there anymore, a mess of roots and mud. We crossed a fallen log, ducked under branches. The forest felt thicker than I remembered, like it had grown up overnight. The air smelled sour like wet iron. We found the camp about an hour later. It looked like someone had tried to live there once. A collapsed lean-to made from logs, a few rusted chairs, and a ring of stones where a fire might have been. Only now, the stones weren't in a circle. They'd been stacked. Figures again, but larger this time. Marla frowned. "It's creepy," she said, bending closer. That's when she saw it. A wooden cross near the back of the clearing. A fresh mound of dirt at its base. Someone had carved a name into the wood. My name, Noah Graves. Reed laughed nervously, said it was probably a prank, but I could see the color drain from his face. I knelt and touched the dirt. It was cold, damp, recently turned. That smell hit again, rotten, sweet, heavy. Something shifted behind us. A branch snapped. I turned and saw movement between the trees. A shape, tall and thin, blacker than the shadows. It leaned forward slow, like it was curious. Reed grabbed my arm. "We need to go. Now. Now." We ran, tearing through the brush. I didn't look back, not even when Marla screamed. The forest twisted around us. Paths doubled back on themselves. The trees all looked the same. I could hear something behind us, not running, just following, always the same distance away. When we finally broke through the trees, the sky had gone gray. The cabin was there ahead of us, but something felt wrong. The door was open. The generator was humming, even though I hadn't touched it all day. We stumbled inside. Marla slammed the bolt shut. For a long time, no one spoke. Later that night, I checked my recorder. I sometimes carried one for notes, to remind myself of directions. When I played it back, all I heard was static, until the last few seconds. "Count your breaths," then silence. I didn't sleep. Every creak in the cabin made my skin crawl. Around 2:17 a.m., the generator sputtered and died. The dark was complete, pressing in. I sat there, trying not to breathe too loud, counting in my head without meaning to. 1, 2, 3, 3. From outside came the sound of stones scraping, something dragging across the porch. Reed whispered for me to stay quiet. We listened. The dragging stopped. Then came a slow tap on the window. Not a knock, a tap, rhythmic, patient. When I turned the flashlight toward it, I saw a handprint smeared across the glass, long fingers. Too long. The whisper came again, closer now. "Count your breaths." The rest of the night was a blur of fear and waiting. We didn't move until morning. When the light finally came, the handprint was gone, but the dirt outside was disturbed, like someone had been crawling around on all fours. Marla refused to stay another hour. They packed and left before breakfast. I told them I'd lock up and follow later, but part of me couldn't leave yet. I had to see something for myself. I hiked back toward the ridge, following my own tracks, tracing the path to the camp. The woods were still, too still. When I reached the clearing, everything was gone. The grave, the stones, the cross, all of it. Just a patch of dead grass and a few scuffed footprints leading into the trees. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of it, trying to believe it had all been some trick of light and fear. Then I noticed something carved into a nearby tree. It was a single line of words, written with something sharp. "Count your breaths, Noah." That was enough for me. I turned and left, didn't stop until I was back on the road with the cabin shrinking behind me. I never told anyone else what really happened. Not the whispers, not the grave, not the thing in the trees. Sometimes, when the world gets too quiet, I still hear it. The rustle of dry leaves sliding across the floor, the sound of something pacing just out of sight. And somewhere in that silence, a voice that doesn't belong to me starts to count. 1, 2, 3, 3. I was 24 when it happened, old enough to know better, too lost to admit it. I had just quit my job at a small repair shop in Cleveland, not because I was fired, but because waking up every morning started to feel like drowning. No reason, no grand collapse, just a slow slipping away from everything. My mom kept calling, asking if I was eating, if I was sleeping. I stopped answering. Eventually, I stopped checking my phone at all. My uncle, who was the kind of man that said little but always seemed to know more than he should, told me I could stay at a cabin a friend of his owned in the Appalachian Mountains. He said it was on the Virginia side, tucked deep enough that I wouldn't hear anything except the wind through the trees. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet. He said maybe I needed quiet. I packed a few clothes, a sleeping bag, canned beans, a flashlight, a lighter, a small axe I'd used once to split kindling, and a notebook I hadn't written in for years. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Just filled my old pickup, drove south, and watched the city fade behind me. The roads grew narrower as I climbed higher. Houses turned to barns, barns to nothing but trees. Service dropped somewhere around the state line, and by the time I crossed the old bridge into the valley, it was like stepping out of the world. The last town before the mountain trail had one diner, a church with a leaning steeple, and a gas station where the attendant stared at me like I shouldn't be there. On the road out of town, nailed to a post, was a wooden sign, hand-painted in uneven black letters. "Slow down the trees, remember?" I laughed then. Took a picture. It felt like the kind of weird backwoods charm you see on postcards. I don't think that anymore. The cabin sat halfway up a steep ridge. The path leading there was half dirt, half gravel, and I had to park 50 feet away because a dead oak had fallen across the road. The forest pressed close, so thick it looked like the trees were leaning in to listen. The cabin itself was small, built from rough-cut logs, a tin roof, a brick chimney, no electricity, a pump sink, and an outhouse out back. The air smelled of pine and old rain. For the first few days, it felt like peace. I woke with the light, walked the ridge, chopped wood, cooked over a fire, read old paperbacks someone had left behind. I stopped checking my phone entirely. I started to believe I'd done the right thing, leaving everything behind. Then came the first night. It was late, maybe near midnight. I was half asleep when a sound pulled me up. It wasn't loud, but it was wrong. A whisper stretched thin, stuttering, like someone trying to speak through a broken radio. I thought it was the wind slipping through cracks in the wall, until it came again. Clearer this time, closer. I sat up, listening. The sound drifted from behind the cabin, near the shed. I told myself it was an animal. Maybe a fox, maybe an owl. The forest makes strange noises. I held on to that thought until morning, when I went outside and found the ground behind the shed marked by footprints. Small, narrow, bare. They stopped a few feet from the door and went nowhere else. Just a dozen perfect prints in the frost, as if someone had stood there watching. I started locking the door after that. Moved my cot away from the window. Kept the axe close. Every night after, the whispering returned, always from the same spot behind the shed. Some nights it was a low murmur, others a stutter like static. I told myself it couldn't be words, but some part of me heard something in it. Something that almost sounded like my name. Days blurred together. Sleep came in pieces. I stopped keeping track of time. The forest felt different. The air felt thicker, like it resisted me. One morning as I walked down the path, I saw a man on a motorcycle come around the bend. He slowed, nodded, passed me. His jacket was torn, his helmet cracked. I watched him ride off until he vanished around the hill. 10 minutes later, I saw him again. Same torn jacket, same bike, passing the same curve. He didn't look at me this time. I froze, heart hammering. The sound of his engine faded, but I knew it was the same man. It had to be. That night, the whisper came earlier, louder. I sat up with the axe in my lap, the fire low. It was just past 2:17 a.m. when I heard someone exhale behind me. A sharp, wet breath, close enough to move the hair on the back of my neck. I turned so fast I nearly fell off the cot. Nothing was there. The room was empty. The door still locked. My reflection trembled in the dark window pane, and for a moment I thought I saw another shape beside mine, tall, thin, shoulders bent. By the fifth night, I started hearing crying from the woods. A woman's voice, distant, soft, almost begging. I called out once. It stopped instantly. Not faded, stopped, like a switch had been flipped. I didn't call again. The next morning, the footprints were back. More of them this time, circling the cabin. I wanted to believe I was dreaming, that maybe I'd wandered outside in my sleep. But when I looked closer, I saw smaller prints beside the first ones, too small to belong to any adult. My hands shook as I backed away. That day, I tried hiking down the ridge. My truck sat where I left it, but the road looked different. The turns were sharper, the trees taller, and every mile I drove down, the air grew darker, though the sky was still bright. After an hour of driving, I passed the same church, the same diner, the same gas station, except the station was boarded up and the sign outside read, "Closed since 1978. I didn't stop. I turned around and drove back, trying to pretend I hadn't seen that. When I reached the cabin again, the air felt heavy, as if the mountain itself was holding its breath. That night, I didn't sleep at all. The whisper came again, steady this time, rhythmic. Like a chant. I heard movement outside, the soft crunch of leaves. I stepped to the window, held my breath, and looked. Shapes moved between the trees, low to the ground, crawling. Their limbs were long, bent wrong, like sticks joined by knots. I backed away, hands shaking on the axe handle. The chanting rose, humming now, deep enough to vibrate the floorboards. I couldn't take it anymore. I threw open the door and ran toward the shed, light trembling in my hand. The sound led me uphill, through branches that tore at my sleeves. The deeper I went, the colder it got. My breath came out white, even though the air shouldn't have been that cold. Then I saw it, a clearing lit by the moon. In the center lay a deer, breathing shallowly, eyes wide open, frozen like stone. Around it were figures. Small, twisted, their skin gray like wet bark. Their eyes glowed pale, their fingers long and knotted. They circled the deer, whispering that same chant, low and steady, pressing the sound into the night. My mind refused to believe it, but my body did. Every part of me screamed to run. I stepped back and a twig cracked beneath my boot. Every single head turned toward me at once. They moved fast. I don't remember the sprint back, only flashes, trees slashing across my vision, my lungs burning, the weight of the mountain pressing against me. I slammed the door shut, threw the chair under the handle, and waited. The humming grew louder outside. Something brushed against the wall, soft as fingertips. Then silence. I didn't move until the light came through the cracks. I left at dawn, not packing anything, not looking back. I ran to the truck and didn't stop until I hit the first real town with people. I pulled into a gas station, stumbled inside, and stood there shaking. The clerk asked if I was okay. I nodded, bought gas, and left. As I drove, I looked at my phone. The last photo I'd taken, the one of the sign, had changed. The letters were darker, sharper. The message was different. They remember you now. I dropped the phone, stared out the windshield, and didn't look back again. I still hear the humming sometimes. Not loud, but enough, like a reminder waiting behind the trees. My name is Jonah, and before all this happened, I worked as a museum archivist in a small city that smelled like old books and bus fumes. I never meant to pick a job that kept me underground sorting boxes, but somehow it suited me. I was always the one who stayed late, the one who stopped to stare at an old photograph for 10 minutes because it felt like the people inside it were trying to speak. When my father passed away 2 years before all this, something in me stayed quiet. I kept working, kept eating, kept sleeping, but my mind kept drifting to forests, mountains, to places untouched by concrete. It felt like something was tugging at me, telling me to go somewhere forgotten. So when a man in a writing forum said his uncle used to own a cabin deep in the mountains and had never returned after leaving for groceries one winter, I should have paused. I should have felt something cold in my stomach. Instead, I laughed it off. People exaggerate online all the time. He warned me the cabin was rough, isolated, barely more than 4 walls and a rooftop. He said the closest town was a fading dot called Ravenden, miles away. No stores, no hotels, no service. The kind of place where you could scream and only the trees would answer. He said the cabin itself was primitive. One huge room, a tiny loft, an old stove that puffed out smoke like it hated working, and a table beneath a bare window. The door had nothing but a crooked wood latch that looked like it would fall apart if a strong breeze hit it. I did not care. I was not going for comfort. I just wanted quiet. The first days passed like a slow breath. I cooked simple meals, wrote scraps of sentences, walked around the tree line, and felt the cold soil under my boots. I managed to write one line in my notebook. The forest felt less empty than it should. I stared at that sentence for hours, trying to decide if it sounded thoughtful or if I was simply tired. The nights came early, swallowing everything around the cabin. The darkness there felt thick, like it carried weight, like it would press against you if you walked too far from the fire. I kept a flashlight beside me every night, just so I knew I had something against the dark. On the 3rd night, I woke to a noise so slow and so controlled that it yanked me upright. It sounded like something dragging a long stick across the wooden floor. One long scrape, as if something moved with care, almost with patience. My mind jumped to animals first. Maybe a raccoon had gotten in, but then the sound hit me again, and I realized it was not outside. It was inside the cabin. Something standing on the same boards I was sleeping on. Fear snapped me awake fully. I swept the room with the flashlight, my breath shaking. Nothing moved. Nothing hid under the table or behind the stove. No pots were shifted. No scratches showed. The fire had died completely. I felt like ice. I stepped outside to clear my head, but the moment I looked at the ground, everything inside me tightened. A thin layer of frost covered the grass, shining under the beam of the flashlight. And inside that frost were footprints. Bare feet. Human. Dozens. They circled the entire cabin twice. Perfect loops, before wandering toward the tree line. I followed them for a short distance, maybe 30 feet, before they stopped cleanly in the center of a patch of frost. No fading. No smudge. No melt. Just a sudden end, as if whoever made them had risen straight off the earth. I did not sleep after that. I sat by the cold fireplace and waited for the sun like it was a lifeboat. The next day I tried to distract myself, but everything felt wrong. I went looking for firewood near the stream behind the cabin, trying to pretend nothing strange had happened. When I returned later, I left my boots by the door like I always did. When I went to put them on the next afternoon, they were gone. I found them sitting neatly on the roof, placed side by side as if someone had set them there with steady hands. The cabin had no ladder. I had to stack logs and climb like a fool to get them back. The moment I touched them, a cold feeling crawled through my chest. Someone had done this carefully, not for a joke, but for a message. I did not know what the message meant, but I felt watched. That night I poured whiskey into a tin cup and sat by the fire trying to calm the shaking in my hands. It worked for a while. I must have fallen asleep sometime near dawn. I woke again to a feeling that made me freeze. It felt like something warm was breathing against my face. No noise. No movement. Just heavy, damp breath pushing against the air itself. I wanted to turn on the flashlight, but something inside me begged me not to move, not even a finger. The air around me felt thick like a wet cloth pressed to my skin. Then the sound started, slow and deep. A croaking noise, but not from a frog. It sounded like something trying to imitate a frog, as if it listened to the sound and repeated it wrong. Too loud. Too moist. Too human. Too human. Like a voice trapped behind water. The croaking moved outside the cabin at first, circling the walls. I heard it pause behind the door, then slide along the window, then drift back into the trees. I stayed frozen beneath the blanket until a pale light crept through the window. When I finally sat up, my whole body shook. By sunrise, I was done pretending this was normal. I wanted to leave. I packed everything fast and grabbed my keys, ready to run. But when I opened the door, I saw the trail was gone. The road I drove up had vanished beneath a wall of branches. They were not fallen. They were woven. Each limb was tucked under another, forming a tight barricade. Someone had built it by hand. Or something. The ground beyond it had turned to mud as if a storm hit only that stretch of land. My car tires spun uselessly. I was trapped. The next night, the croaking returned, slower this time, thicker. Heavy breaths pressed through the cabin walls. It did not stay outside. It slipped inside without a creak or a whisper. One moment there was nothing, and the next there was hot air brushing my cheek like something leaning close. I could feel it but not see it. I lay perfectly still, my heart beating so loud it hurt. The air seemed to push down on me, almost crushing my ribs. I waited for hours like that until the first gray light touched the window. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. Gentle. Patient. Like someone who knew I had nowhere to go. I stared at the door until my eyes watered. It knocked again, louder, then again, each time growing stronger. When it stopped, I waited for breath to return to my body. I finally stood and stepped toward the window, my hands shaking. No one stood outside, but on the fogged glass, written through the thin mist of my breath, were 3 words. You woke it. I ran barefoot into the woods, the cold slicing my feet. I did not look back. I did not care about my things. All I wanted was to reach the road. I crashed through brush and mud until I reached the open path miles down. By some miracle, a logging truck rumbled by. The driver saw me waving and stopped. He did not ask why I looked like I had crawled out of the ground. He only passed me a warm thermos and kept going until we reached town. I never returned for my things. I never told the man about his uncle. I did not want to hear him say he had seen the same thing. I tried to forget it all, but every night since then I see pieces of it outside my window, handprints I did not put there. Sometimes on the 2nd floor, even though I live alone. Sometimes I feel heavy rain outside, but when I look, I see a tall figure standing perfectly still under the streetlight, not moving even when the storm pounds the ground. And last week, walking home with groceries, I heard footsteps above me, not behind me, not beside me, above me, on the branches, light and steady, like someone pacing back and forth over my head waiting for me to notice. I do not know how long it followed me from that mountain. I do not know if the thing I woke ever truly lost me, or if I only gave it more room to watch. But every night I keep my lights low, trying not to see the shapes on the windows. And every night, without fail, something taps 3 times on the glass beside my bed.